So thank you, Ken. It's fantastic to be back here, especially at the Berkeley Center for New Media. It's amazing back in the day when we were creating it and talking about what the future would be, and it's starting to arrive in really interesting ways. And I think that this forum today, about the future of the forum, really helps us begin to articulate a framework for thinking about the future, both from academic, industrial, and governmental perspectives. And in talking about play today, I'm intentionally really am focusing on play as opposed to game, because I've got Jane here, and so I'm ventured to do that. But also to think about playfulness in the forum and what enables really this context here, the physical world, to become a new type of game board and play space for us. And what's really changing the nature of the forum is not just the massive online communities of Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, but the fact that there are billions of human beings on the planet carrying with them what, for us old guys, are very powerful computers, right? Networked to each other with amazing capabilities. And over the next few years, my iPhone 3GS will be a $25 feature phone in India. Right? So you have to really think about that in the very near term, the massive transformations occurring and what it means to be connected to each other, and very importantly, connected to the physical world. That was part of my nature of my argument with Professor Dreyfus earlier. And we had a good talk after. So here's the basic point, that we're moving from an internet that was largely disconnected from the physical world. The internet of humans and computers networked together, the social web, not hydrogen and carbon, but humans and computers. And these frameworks even existed in early computer scientific thinking and cyberneticians and systems theory about what it means to have large connected networks of computational and human components. But much of what we've talked about today is the idea of the social web as the forum. But there's another place that people spend a lot of time besides the internet. It's called the world, and it's a really nice place, and I hope you visit there sometime. And the mediating technology that is connecting the web and the world is, of course, that device that most of you are carrying. How many of you have cell phones with you now? Okay, how many of those have cameras on them? Now, Ken told us we couldn't use our cameras, and I'm going to talk to him about that later. It's an interesting question of rights. But in most contexts, this entire event would be documented visually as it's happening, and in real time, though we've been doing it textually through Twitter and the rest. So if you think about what a phone is and what it means as an artifact and how it changes the nature of the forum, it's important to kind of deconstruct it and reconstruct it. So importantly, it's a personal device carried on the body. It is the 24/7 ubiquitous computer dreamed of in the early days. Now again, at the scale of billions of human beings on the planet. Of course, it's a two-way voice communication device and text, increasingly a media consumption device, but the crucial change, I think, for the future of play and of the forum is that it's a media production device. That our ability to understand what is happening in the world now and in the past, to imagine what it will be in the future, is changed by networked, location and context-aware camera phones in the hands of billions of human beings on the planet. And so what really transforms the phone is that it's a sensor in a sensor network. It connects the internet to the physical world. Think of every bit created on the internet as actually coming from some real physical location, and in fact that's true. Every bit on the internet originates often from a real person or people at a real time, at a real location, this event. So we think of the Twitter hashtag, #FOTF. In a way, that's a brilliant hack to solve the problem which should be built into the nature of the devices that we use, that we're all here now together at this event, paying attention hopefully to what I'm saying. Right? So we have an internet emerging that actually connects the bits that are stored in servers to their origin and their life in physical reality, in the social life in the physical world. And so phones become a social and cognitive prosthetic device that enables collective embodied intelligence and forms of engagement, commerce, and play that are transformative for the nature of what the internet can be in the nature of society. What's being created are new information resources, new graph structures of data that didn't exist before. The graph of who you are and who you know. The graph of places in the world. Google's GeoNames project, Yahoo's Placemaker, and WOID GeoPlanet projects, creating numeric models of not just where you are, but the containment of regions in the world, right? Being able to understand that we are in this building, in the Berkeley campus, in a certain part of Berkeley, in Alameda County, giving you a way to control disclosure of location information and to refer to not just a web of pages, but literally a web of the world, right? A web of the physical reality. Time is one of the great overlooked components. We have it for free now in these devices. We're looking at real time, but the ability to not only understand now, but the periods and cycles of human life. The difference between daytime and nighttime, weekend and weekday. So the internet is being connected to the flows and pulses and rhythms of human life in the physical world in a way that wasn't true before. And emerging, of course, in the Internet of Things is our ability to sense the objects and devices around us, and increasingly to understand their histories and, in some senses, their intentions and our relationship to them. So if you think of what the future of the forum, I think, will be founded on and the play we do within it, it's what we call Web 4, Web to the Fourth, which is thinking of every bit on the Internet as situated within these data structures of where, when, who, and what. And in a sense, any bit on the web exists within this space. It's a set of links between these information objects, the contextual metadata that defines where we are, who we connect to, what time it is, what we're doing. And so that's radically transformative for the nature of the Internet and the types of things we can do with each other. Because you can think of your life. Each of you got up in the morning, you had breakfast, you were maybe with your significant other, you got here somehow, and in a way you've created a path through where, through when, through who, and through what. Your day and your life moves in a sort of imaginary Web 4 space. But you're not alone. Others do that as well. And Ken will appreciate this is not exactly a mathematical model, but we're talking about manifolds in n-dimensional space, right? That these clusters of attention, like we're doing right now, all of us in this room together, are these paths of moving through Web 4 space that link people together at concrete times and places. The recordability and our ability to make the invisible visible, the impermanent permanent, and to have access to this type of data is completely transformative for what we can actually do. Now, the inspiration for this, oddly enough, came in 2002 when I was sitting in my office at South Hall, looking out the Campanile and realizing, and no longer my office, so not at Berkeley anymore, but that hundreds of people a day walk up near this tower, they pull out their cameras. In 2002, they would pull out a digital camera, perhaps, not a phone this much, and it would be pic47.jpg. That would be the metadata about that photo. And we thought, well, if you're near the Campanile and you're a tourist, the probability that your attention will focus on that object versus the ground is actually computable. So you begin to think of imagery as actually the record of human attention in the world, right? Not bits in a database. And in fact, we've built face recognition algorithms which outperform the best image analysis algorithms that just looked at where you took the photo, when you took it, and who took it, and who you shared it with, and did not look at the photo at all, and outperformed it. Because the probability that I'm going to photograph my daughter right now is what? 0, because she's not here. Right? So if we think of the Internet as connected to physical reality, and the records of the Internet and data as records of human attention in the real world, now we start to create an Internet that really does connect people, the web, and the world. So if you're curious, these were the projects we did at UC Berkeley on this. First, in being able to use context to infer the tags and suggest tags for people's photos, and then to suggest who people might share photos with. This is now almost 7 years ago. What's occurred, though, of course, is in the intervening time, and largely through devices like this and through other phone companies, now Google's one as well, it's interesting, making the invisible visible, the impermanent permanent, recording and sharing explicit and implicit human attention, not only on the web but in the world. The ability to analyze and interpolate these records and patterns. Why did I actually, someone asked, why did you go from academia to industry? Well, actually I said to Beth Burnside, if I were a physicist and I said I was going to build a cyclotron in my office, you'd think I'm crazy. And companies like Yahoo, Google, and the rest have the data sets of human attention in the world that can be analyzed to do the new science of the Internet. That's really a challenge, frankly, for academia right now, is not having access to what will be the foundational data for a computational social science. So we can do this type of analytics at multiple scales, personal, social, and global, and enable new forms of communication and participation. So if you think of the play and design space of social alone, we can talk about mobile in a moment, a lot of what happens now in the kind of social space is there's a certain number of people kind of approaching the 150 Dunbar number, but exceeding it in certain ways, and a certain amount of information volume that you get from them, we kind of manage this socially. But then there's information like my heart rate or my blood glucose or what site I'm looking at right now, or not at this moment, but later, that might want to be private, that I would share with myself, but not with others, but I may be willing to share with a small subset of people. Right? So this space is one that's going to explode, actually, and there's a lot of work in health gaming and the rest about making this, and that was mentioned earlier today, making this highly personal information accessible to others and using game dynamics to affect how people generate and affect their behavior. The space we've looked at a lot is global. what does collaboration look like on the scale of hundreds of millions of people? And in thinking about the forum, the only way we've had to do this before has been to vote. That has been the main process whereby 100 or 200 million people could actually do something together in a meaningful way that affects action in the world. So what we've been looking at both at Yahoo and Invention Arts is the scale of social interaction at global scale. So here's a quick example for you. Time out. Oh, I didn't see your other things. Okay, 1 minute just to show it. All right. So here's a Flickr map of the UC Berkeley area. That's the photo I took before Ken said we could not take photos inside. Give me a hard time about that, which is the exterior. And you'll notice that there are 180,007 geotagged items just in this area. So the page on Flickr is only showing a very tiny subset of the photographic and visual attention of human beings there. What we developed was a way to analyze 30 million geocoded photos to say what's the language that people use in describing their experience of space and what do they find salient. Discovering that not only is the Campanile important, that people play football there, they go to concerts here, and that there's a great restaurant, which if you don't know about it, you do now, which is one of the most famous restaurants in the Berkeley area. The point I want to make here about curation and my argument with Laura Seidel earlier, there is no editor doing this whatsoever. This is just based on analyzing the patterns of massive amounts of users contributing what they find important and worth paying attention to in the world, including the fact that there's a statue of Yoda in the Presidio, which I didn't know before we built this. So we are leaving traces around us that articulate the type of world we want to live in and creating, if you will, a digital game space and play space. I'm out of time, so I'll have to talk to you guys in the break about how we're doing this to actually change the nature of intellectual property and to create ways for companies to invent this future together and to solve it and to create, in a sense, a forum that makes it possible not just for companies to, in a siloed way, create the Web 4 future, but to work together with us to invent what the framework will be to provide freedom to operate and freedom to innovate in this emerging world. And we can talk about that later. So thank you very much. And